What up, what up, what up? Welcome back to the Trash Talk Fantasy Football Podcast. I am your host, Angelo Sandone, alongside Mike Ciroc the Cock and Mario Maniaci. What's up, gentlemen?
What's going on?
How's everybody feeling? So we are at part 2 of today's podcast. Guys, real quick, I just want to remind you guys to please like and subscribe to this video on YouTube. Follow us on Instagram at Trash Talk Fantasy _podcast and Twitter at Fantasy_trash. Come holler at us. Hit us up. We're not angry guys. We just want to be your friends. We just want to help you win your fantasy football league and talk shit to your friends. I think that's a pretty good thing. So let's start off the second half of the podcast. Let's get right into the rookie outlook. First up on our watch list, we have n-keel Harry from New England. Mike, tell me a little bit about n-keel Harry.
All right. He's a big boy, right? 6'3", 228. And New England coming in and grabbing him with that, second to last pick in the first round. This is classic New England, grabbing a great player that, is going to give them something late in the first round of the draft. He had over 1,000 yards each of his last 2 years in college. 8 touchdowns 1 year, 9 touchdowns last year. He could be a big red zone threat with Gronk gone.
He's the number two.
Maybe get some play right from the door. There weren't a lot of rookie wide receiver hype this year that I felt. He's the guy I think that can contribute year one.
So with our second name on the watch list, DJ Metcalf, he's another guy. So we just talked about Lockett. Is Lockett the number one? Is Metcalf have the with his skill set and how he plays? Is Metcalf able to be the number one receiver in Seattle?
No, I think that's clearly going to be Lockett. Metcalf, he's going to have trouble getting on the field early. He's that big body, 6'3", 228, just like n-keel.
He's a freak.
Yeah, but he's fast as shit.
But he also only played 2 years in college.
Yeah, and at Ole Miss...
See, I feel like his game speed was a little bit slower than his 40 led on to believe.
Yeah, he could be just a...
I think Harry...
A combine ninja,
Combine ninja. I like that. I think we're going to save that one for later.
Yeah, if Pete Carroll can really get it to translate... But like I said, he was only 600 receiving yards and then only had 5 touchdowns this year.
Yeah.
Out of someone that you're expecting to contribute in the pro right away, he just didn't put up the numbers in college that you think is going to translate. But Pete Carroll has done a lot with, who knew who the fuck Doug Baldwin was? And he's had 3 really good seasons in a row.
Yeah, moving on. Number 3 on our watch list, Deebo Samuel from San Francisco. I'm not as high as you guys on him. He's a flyer. You're drafting Samuel way, way late in drafts. You're drafting him after Andy Isabella and all those kind of guys. He is not the number one. He doesn't have a fair chance to be number one. Jimmy Garoppolo coming back is going to be passing to the running back a lot. They have McKinnon. They have Tevin Coleman. They have all these pass-catching backs. I don't think that
Plus they got Kittle.
And honestly, let's be real. As much as I said it last week with the running backs, as much as I love rookie running backs in the early rounds, I stay the hell away from rookie wide receivers. It takes a couple years to get to this game speed. Yeah. They're playing air raid type offenses and things like that, and that it's not equating to the basic route tree that these guys should have coming out of college like they used to.
They're going against defenders that they never faced anyone that good.
The game is changing.
The best cornerback they're facing is the worst quarterback in the NFL.
Yeah, if you're lucky. Yeah. If you're lucky in that situation. And then we're going to go ahead and see. Here's my other issue with Deebo. He plays on San Fran. What's the initials for San Fran?
Slow and fat.
Yeah, slow. Deebo Samuel, he's got some speed. I'm a little worried about his size. 5'11", 215.
Ain't a small forward.
Yo, boss, you didn't skip no plates at turkey dinner, cuz.
No.
That's a little much for me. So I just don't think it's his year. I don't think we'll see his ceiling. I don't think we'll see anything close to it. Moving on to our next guy, 6 foot, 205, Paris Campbell, guy who's going to come into Indianapolis with Luck playing better, T.Y. Hilton playing better. They just picked up Funches as a possible red zone target. They have Doyle. They have Eric Ebron. There's mouths to feed there. I still like him for that Moncrief role. Last year, Moncrief had about 90 receptions, just around 1,000 yards, just around the 8 touchdown mark. He was a solid number 3 fill-in receiver. Paris Campbell does have that opportunity. I'm actually kind of higher on his ceiling this season alone in redraft than I am most other guys.
Yeah, just in general, there's a couple teams are going to score points. Indianapolis is one of them. Score. Their defense let up a lot, and they threw the ball a lot last year.
Well, the thing
they're going to put up points, and there's a couple people on their offense. It's one of the I hate starting multiple players on the same offense unless it's one like them or someone like New England where you run like a James White and Edelman together.
Absolutely.
Or you get a nice pairing in the Rams.
Yeah, those systems.
They just produce points. So
yeah. So moving on, number 5, Mecole Hardman in Kansas City. Mario, why do we like Mecole Hardman?
He's all right. He's 5'10". He went in the second round. Him and Andy Isabella went sort of back-to-back, 6 picks apart. Now, here's the difference. Mecole Hardman had 2 touchdowns in 2 years.
Okay.
All right? Whereas Isabella, 4 years, 30 total touchdowns.
Wow.
Or actually, over
really?
30 total.
Wow,
yeah,
that's
in
insane.
4 years. So I'd actually, with Isabella, with Kyler Murray, I mean, these guys could really be explosive. So I really like Isabella.
Well, Isabella's the slot guy, I feel like, right?
Well, Larry Fitz kind of moved into that role. So let's see how they decide they want to use him.
But he's short. He's 5'9".
But if you're learning from Larry Fitz, dude, the best hands on the planet, there's a lot of options. You're getting a wide receiver that can grow with a quarterback. So even if this isn't his year, next year, the year after, you could really see him take off.
It's definitely Larry Fitz's role this year to teach that young Padawan squad.
Yeah.
For sure. All right, guys.
Dynasty guy.
And with Hardman,
most of these.
We didn't even talk about Andy Reid, right? And Andy Reid just always grabs people. Deshaun Jackson produces a
second
rookie.
round. Second round.
And
that's actually a very comparable player to Hardman. Is Deshaun Jackson? If Tyreek Hill is out, he's going to probably fill in that role. I do like other players that they have and things like that, but Mecole Hardman is a name to watch. Guys, these are like 13th round and later, 14th round and later, guys. These are the last teams because you don't want to pick your defense and kicker yet. This is where you're drafting a lot of these guys in redraft. As far as dynasty, that's a whole different monster. These guys are first to second, third round talent. This is all upper echelon guys. If you're in a rookie draft and you don't know any rookie wide receivers,
take a flyer on any one
of these guys, and you should do pretty well. Moving on into our sleepers segment, starting off our list of 6, it is Sutton and Sanders by default. I'm just going to have to go ahead and put a backslash on him.
Well, I'll put a backslash on both of them.
I like Sutton.
I don't know who it is.
You guys like Sanders. I'm sold that it's Sutton. Look at his production at the end of the season. He wound up with 4 touchdowns. Emmanuel Sanders wound up getting hurt, so we can't really use that,
But Sanders has been that guy for me for years. I never draft him.
Right.
I always play him, and he fucking rapes me. He's just a guy that always puts up good numbers. And now you get Joe Flacco, probably the best quarterback he's played with in 5
But he's
seasons.
getting drafted ahead of Sutton, and I don't think that's fair. I think there's a little bit of question around Sutton because he's so young, but he started to show at the end of the year. And Sanders isn't that go out on the outside and bust people's ankles open type of receiver anymore. He's much more of the cut over the middle and grab a short pass kind of guy, while Sutton's going to be the outside guy filling in for Demaryius Thomas. That's why I think it's Sutton. His ADP is lower than Sanders. You can maybe wait a little bit on him to go ahead and pick him up.
And Flacco can throw the ball down the field.
Me and you have our debates on that.
He's got a cannon. Whether you like him as a quarterback or not, I don't like him as a quarterback.
Joe Flacco.
I think he's the epitome of average, but he's got a strong arm and could always throw it down the field.
I punched Joe Flacco right in the face right now. Tell me a little bit about D-Jax, our number 2 wide receiver sleeper.
All right, Deshaun Jackson back in Philadelphia. You saw what he did for years, under Coach Reid. And Doug Peterson, coming from Coach Reid, running similar offenses, loves to take the shots down the field, has that speed. You saw it when they had Mike Wallace and,
Torrey Smith.
And
absolutely.
Throwing that
and
outside
Aguilar
shoulder down the field. So
I think Aguilar's a little bit underrated, but I love Djax. He's meshing well with Carson Wentz. Djax, listen, he is boomer bust. He is that kind of receiver where he's going to have you. He's very volatile. He's going to have you bigger games and smaller games because he's going to have a 70-yard touchdown catch in one and not the other. But last year, his numbers dropped drastically when Winston was in. As soon as Fitzmagic came in, his numbers shot through the ceiling. He was actually a guy that I was targeting for cheap penny trades.
Yeah, which is crazy because you'd think the more the gunslinger of the two is Jameis Winston.
Couldn't get it out to him.
Jameis Winston just loves to fucking target
big-bodied receiver. He likes a big. And Mike, to my point earlier in the first part of the podcast, Mike Evans has been making clown quarterbacks look good for a long time, starting with Johnny Manziel.
Yeah.
So that's where we're at there. Moving on from Deshaun Jackson, we'd like Allen Robinson this year. So with Allen Robinson, it really comes down to his ADP, and he's another year removed from all of the injuries and all that stuff. We have Trubisky with another year under his belt. So why do we like Allen Robinson so much? Where do we think he's going to place? I think...
Listen, anyone that can make Blake Bortles look good for a stretch of time, what him and Allen Hurns did for him down in Jacksonville, I'm willing to take a flyer with a much better quarterback with Mitchell Trubisky.
Well, he's currently right outside the top 30, and I just think that's insane. You have Jarvis Landry, who can't do anything with 150 targets. You have Sammy Watkins, who most people are still including Tyreek Hill and Sammy Watkins kind of in the same area. Tyler Lockett, like you have all these names, and then you have Allen Robinson, who's coming off that injury, and he played fairly well last year. That's a good offensive line with a good quarterback. Moving on.
Yeah, but the issue with them is they play slow.
Okay.
Right. Their defense, they relied on their defense so much.
Well, and they're going to pound the ball. They're going to pound the ball, but believe it or not, their pass offense is one of the best in the NFL.
So.
And it had to be with Trubisky. It had to be, but Trubisky actually started to come out of his shell a little bit. You know, they were tossing 8% of the time. They were only throwing over 20 yards the first half of the season. Second half of the season, they were throwing more to 13%, over 20 yards.
Yeah, and that year that Allen Robinson had down with Blake Bortles, was averaging. Remember, him and Hurns were both the top, like in the top 5 in yards per catch in that 17 yards per catch range, where we talked about T.Y. Hilton and Tyler Lockett were last year. So if he can get into that range and Trubisky's getting the ball down the field to him, there's no reason he shouldn't be able to have another breakout season.
Well, we love Robinson, that's for sure. Moving on to number 4, we have Christian Kirk. I like Christian Kirk. I'm throwing Christian Kirk in here because he is the most experienced out of the younger guys in there. We have Larry Fitzgerald to kind of help, so it's not all on Christian Kirk to lead the team here. But you have a new quarterback. He's used to playing with them. They have prior experience. He's going to be playing a lot of slot and inside receiver in that air raid system, which is going to be good for him coming out of college. He played something very similar to that. Christian Kirk is a guy who's getting drafted around the area of Will Fuller, Dante Pettis, Sterling Shepard, Marvin Jones. Quick little name game. Would you rather have Christian Kirk or Sterling Shepard?
Christian Kirk.
Would you rather have Christian Kirk or Marvin Jones?
Christian Kirk.
Christian Kirk or Alshon Jeffrey?
Alshon.
Christian Kirk or Will Fuller?
See, I mean, it's like you looked at our bus list.
Yeah.
I'm just really low on Fuller. I'm going to go Kirk just because I'm really low on Fuller. I think he kind of gets replaced out.
Moving on. I like it. Moving on. Number 5, we have Michael Gallup. Mario, fill me in a little bit about Michael Gallup.
Well, Gallup had 33 receptions last year. He had 500 yards. He was averaging over 15 yards a carry, so that's pretty close to that 17 that we're really seeing guys hit. I want to say he was about 48% on the deep ball, and they fixed a step or two there, and he could be hitting a lot more home runs.
Yeah, it's going to come down to Dak, being willing to throw it downfield. I saw him go up and grab quite a few 50-50 balls. I mean, I watch every game I can, and he really impressed me. He's got speed, he's got great hands, he's got great body awareness. So I expect him to make some big plays. It's just whether or not they're willing to give him the opportunities is what it's going to.
His target share is really going to determine his ceiling.
I agree with you guys 100%. closing out our sleeper segment is just a name that I want to throw out there to you guys. His name is Mr. Curtis Samuels, playing in Carolina. Here's my thing. DJ Moore's ADP is much closer to 25. Curtis Samuels at 49, right around the corner from 50. Curtis Samuels last year was supposed to be a big name going into camp. DJ Moore is supposed to be an accessory to Curtis Samuels until the injury happened. Curtis Samuels and DJ Moore are very different style receivers, and I don't see DJ Moore coming off and taking that slot completely away. So I think their target share is going to be decent. I think for one to be drafted at 50 and one to be drafted at 25, I think the value there is just something that should be checked out for a potential number one wide receiver all the way in the end of the 12th round.
Yeah, you have to realize, too, I just don't like wide receivers on Carolina. Cam Newton's just been really unreliable for me for wide receivers. I mean, look at what Kelvin Benjamin came into the league. I know he had the weight problems and workout problems, but he was someone that everyone thought was going to be the breakthrough guy. Besides Greg Olsen, he's never produced someone that was consistent. It's always been more around the running backs, Christian McCaffrey, him running in stuff himself. Someone's going to have to prove to me that he can throw touchdown passes. I mean, if he's back like he was, where they're really mixing in the run and the pass, and his MVP campaign year that he had about 3 years ago,
and he could come, and he could listen. Cam Newton does have. We all know the stats. Cam Newton very well could be a top 5 quarterback this year, and nobody should be too surprised about that. But that wraps up our sleeper section. So we want to go ahead and figure out who are the busts, who are the guys that are going to crack your lineup and bust your balls at those points in the season when you draft them to really come in and help fill in for you. I think collectively the first name on our board is Corey Davis, right?
Right. As soon as you brought up the conversation of who busts were, I think we all looked at each other and within a couple seconds knew. This is a guy I drafted last year, and I know others were burnt by that. Marcus Mariota they just don't throw the ball downfield enough. They didn't give him enough opportunities. Now, when they gave him the opportunities, he, like they did in the Eagles game when he had 10 catches and the 3 touchdowns and was the MVP of that game, he performed. But outside of that game,
he needs the targets. He needs the targets. If he was a guy who was getting 150 targets, that would be great. The problem is that the Titans are 31st overall in pass attempts. They were finally able to get Derrick Henry running behind that offensive line and built trust in him. And he wound up with 112 targets, 891 yards, 4 touchdowns. Only tied for 40th in fantasy receptions and 56th in touchdowns.
250 and 3 touchdowns were in the one game.
Well, here was the problem. So he started running his routes a lot better. He's really developing as a receiver. It's a shame he's in Tennessee, but now he's getting number 1 cornerback coverage, which is also tapering his numbers. Which he's one of those receivers. Look at the half of the season compared to the other.
Marcus Mariota's from that Ducks offense, and he still tries to run it similar in the NFL.
Always and forever, my friend.
Just looks for the short, open guy. He doesn't know how to throw to a receiver coming out of a route. I've never seen him throw a good timing pass. He really needs to develop as a quarterback, or they got to move on from him. Because, I mean, when we get the quarterbacks, he'll be on my bus list.
Number 2 for us is Sterling Shepard. Me and Mike are pretty hell-bent that Sterling Shepard's a hot piece of garbage. And it's a shame because I don't think that he's a bad player. I think he's going to have games. I don't think he'll do anything but flash in the pan for you guys, though. Just overall, you look at the injury history, and yes, you could say OBJ being gone, he's going to get more targets. I honestly think that Evan Ingram is the name that really comes up with all those extra targets. And Saquon Barkley as well, obviously. Where was Sterling Shepard last year as far as stats?
I mean, he had 66 receptions, 872 yards, but only 4 touchdowns.
Right.
I mean, when you get in the red zone, where's he at?
Yeah. Well, he's not. He's like a Victor Cruz in that sense.
Yeah, but did they get into the red zone?
Yeah. Also, you have to get to the fucking red zone.
I mean, his best hope is that Eli turns him in. He's got some speed, and you need someone with a strong arm to really feed him down the field. And that's going to help Saquon too. I just think he's going to be competing with Ingram, Barkley, Tate.
Yeah,
and he didn't do anything.
In an offense that's just not going to do. It's not. You're poking at the stick. Do something.
They haven't fixed that offensive line yet. The offensive line was one of the worst in the league last year. Eli was snap and throw. He has no time.
Well, they did make some draft picks. They are trying to help that O-line, but I don't think it's going to be enough.
They picked up the Zeckler from the Browns in the trade. So, I mean, that was a big... He was, I think, a top right guard.
We talked about that last week. We did, they have done something, but it's actually a better run defense, offensive line than it is a passing. Moving on, number 3, Will Fuller. I think the approach on Will Fuller is... You can't stay healthy. There's a lot of mouths to feed. One being the number 1 receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, and then having Kiki QT, who's another guy who's very similar to Fuller. Honestly, I think we could talk about Fuller and QT in that same sense, but they're being drafted at the back end of drafts. I can't really complain about that.
Fuller came out early last year and had 2 big games, and I think what happened there is not that he's not a nice receiver. I just think he got overhyped. Well, and that's why he's in the bust category. I think
he's 32 overall. I could see him being 40 or 50th.
Yeah.
I could see him being Corey Davis. He doesn't get on the field enough. Right. He just doesn't. If you're not on the field, you're not helping anybody. Speaking of guys that are not helping anybody, let's talk about Mr. Funches. Now, this is a Mike pick. I think where he's getting drafted versus where he's going to end up, I feel like he could take some of those touchdowns away from Eric Ebron.
Exactly, Angelo. There's just too many mouths to feed there, and he's just been continues to disprove himself. Right, last year, and everyone was expecting him to get touchdowns and score in Carolina, and just didn't emerge. When Kelvin Benjamin left and went down the year before. He just never he doesn't step up and take it, right? And you really just gotta have that dog.
Step up and take it.
I don't think he has it.
All right, let's have a little conversation here. Mike Williams,
hate him.
Why?
We talked about it. That San Diego offense. There's just not. I don't think Phillip Rivers is gonna. They rely so much on the backs and Keenan Allen. He's just odd man out. Last year, when Keenan Allen went down, he had that one real nice game with the 3 touchdowns. He's just completely inconsistent, and I don't see any reason or anything that changed.
I don't like him 25th overall in the receiving category.
Yeah. And I just don't see that anything changed there.
If we're playing a name game, I'm taking Jarvis Landry over Mike Williams. I'm taking Calvin Ridley over Mike Williams. I'm taking Tyler Boyd. I'm taking Sammy Watkins. I'm taking Robbie Anderson.
Alshon,
Why
Allen
is
Robinson.
Mike Williams in that category? I get. There's just too much hype.
Yeah.
Not at 25 overall. If he was at 30, I might be telling you he's maybe a decent play. But that's just where we stand on that. Last but not least on our bust list, a guy that I will bust on day in, day out. Get your board bets in. I would love to make some Smirnoff Ice Neil bets with your boys and the listeners of this show. AJ Green. No 1,300-yard game since 2013. He has a foot injury. It doesn't get any better than that. They're running into a system where he's going to play a Robert Woods type role, which is a little bit more of a consolidated type role because he's not getting as much time in the slot. That'll be guys like Tyler Boyd and people like that. AJ Green will not play the whole year. Even when he did play the whole year, he was volatile. I don't know why you guys want to draft him this early. It just seems fucking insane to me. Anybody want to even just have the argument at this point? Would you like to beat the dead horse?
No.
All right.
We've worked him into every one of the episodes so far.
So, yeah, I'll tell you what. I can't keep him the fuck out of my mouth.
We're Blackhawks.
Dude, shit. Is it Thursday?
They're always 3 clicks away.
They're always 3
Did
clicks
you mean
away.
Blackhawks?
All right, folks. Last segment of the show here. I am very excited. We had a lot of participation from you guys on Instagram and Twitter especially. We really, really appreciate it. We appreciate all the feedback. Please tell us how much we suck. We are trying not to suck. So, but nonetheless, you still like our advice. So that means a lot to us. I think we're all
not just
pretty
that.
happy.
A great drinking game when you listen to us is every time Angelo says absolutely.
You say absolutely more than I do.
No way.
All right.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, motherfucker. First question up in the mailbag is, would you want Dante Moncrief or Paris Campbell in a redraft-only league? And that is from our buddy Slasher18 on Instagram. I don't know about you guys. in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and take Moncrief.
Yeah, I'm there too.
And basically, here's my thought process on this. So, I'm going to take Moncrief. Aside from 2015, he's never been a top 40 wide receiver. 38 personal best. Okay, I get it. Though, last year had a huge comeback stat-wise. Thanks to luck and the Colts playing better, in my opinion. Plus, he stayed healthy, which is huge. Which means that the talent was there all along. He's now heading to Pittsburgh, where the number 2 receiver job is still up in the air. There's a bunch of young guys there, and they pass a hell of a lot. 68% of the time, in fact. Yeah, that'll degrade a little bit, but they're still passing to the backs. They're still going to go ahead and pass first. That's what they do. I don't think they're going to become this super run-heavy team now and run the ball 600 times. He should and very well could be the number 2 wide receiver heading into camp this year. So, out of Moncrief for Parrish, we got 3 for the Creef, baby. Number 2. Now, this was actually an expert question, which was pretty cool, from our friends over at Underdog Fantasy Instagram, which, by the way, our boy over there, he actually guessed our Instagram, guessed the player, which was Mike Thomas. He was the first. We also had another guy. I don't want to hurt no feelings. He called him Mr. Can't
Big
Guard
stuff.
Him. And I had never heard that nickname from Michael Thomas, or I feel like if I had, it's like vague. So I Google searched it, right? And I Google searched it, and I said, well, I should be able to put Can't Guard Him Michael Thomas and at least get something. I got nothing. So I'm not going to mention your name. You get no shout out. If I had a drop right now, it would be the fucking Willy Wonka when he tells me to get the fuck out of the factory. So I'm sorry, but it goes to Underdog Fantasy. We're happy to have you, brother. We run a lot of different events with them, different expert rankings and mock drafts all throughout the week. I'm sure you guys see the content on Instagram. It's always a fun time. But into their question. So, in a trade, would you rather receive Ezekiel Elliott and Michael Thomas, or David Johnson, Mike Evans, and Edelman? Now, it took me a little bit to think about this.
Not me.
You were dead on.
I was dead on.
You were dead on.
The second you asked me, I went with Zeke and Mike Thomas. Now, there's some caveats to that, right? If this is a preseason trade and you're talking keepers and you can keep all.
Well, this
players,
is right now. This is right now. This is today.
Then that's the way I looked at it. So that's why I was Zeke and Mike Thomas. You're going to have a top tier, a better running back, the best running back in there, and the best wide receiver in there, and then you can build your team and you can find other players around that. David Johnson, Mike Evans, and Edelman is going to be nice. It's going to give you some nice depth, but you're not getting that top tier talent that's going to win you the ship.
But with Evans and Edelman, I mean, you have 2 really solid receiver guys that are consistent. Mike Evans, huge yards. Winston loves them.
Yeah, we love him this year.
So.
Okay, so here's what it is for me, and here's how I look at this. Who is a receiver on your team that's going to fill in that spot for the hypothetical Edelman, right? Who is your 3? Who's your trio if we're playing NBA Heat and we're getting it on NBA Jam, rather, not NBA Heat. It was some fire. But who would you have? Who are your starting 3? Well, if your starting 3 is Tyler Boyd, Michael Thomas, and Zeke, you have 2 top 5 talents versus 3 top 15 with high top 8 upside, let's say, for each guy, hypothetically. I'm going to go ahead and take that if I have Tyler Boyd. But if I have a name somewhere along the lines of Marvin Jones, n-keel Harry, Larry Fitzgerald, Corey Davis, I'm going to rethink that and see if, hey, maybe I get lucky and get 2 top 8 players in the top 12. Pound for pound, that might win you a championship, depending on how it all breaks down. But in this particular situation, man, to not have Zeke and Michael Thomas on your team.
I mean, you could have 2 number 1s right there.
So that's it. We're going Zeke and Michael Thomas. Final answer. Bang the gavel, B. We have a third question. I actually was not as impressed with this question initially as I am today. We got this question a couple weeks ago from Drake on Instagram. Really cool dude. We had some great conversations about the Eagles' backfield a couple weeks ago, him and I. Who were we taking, Odell or Brown?
Look at our rankings. 6 versus 8.
I'm going Odell. So
we ranked them close, so it's close. All 3 of us on our list had Odell over Brown, so I think we're going to be unanimous on the Odell side. We mentioned multiple times in this podcast alone how much we just hate players switching teams, and it's really going to come down to who meshes with their quarterback the best. And if I have to pick between the two quarterbacks, I'm going Baker Mayfield over Derek Carr. So that's why I think Odell's going to
at this point
just
because you're not Carr. What I like about this is it's kind of crazy. Last year I sat in a situation, not to talk about myself, but I will. I sat in a situation last year where I was torn between DeAndre Hopkins, Odell Beckham Jr., and Antonio Brown. I had my shot at any of them. All the running backs were gone. I got my first shot at the receiving core. I went with Hopkins because I saw him play with shitty quarterbacks. And that's why in our top 25 from part 1, that's so important that these guys, we know they can play with shit quarterbacks. Because now OBJ, well, we're not sure. And I'm not calling Mayfield shit. I think Mayfield's going to be a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah, but I'd call Eli shit.
But we don't know. We don't know. Brown, we don't know. Now, it's crazy how the situation turned out to be the way that it was.
Yeah, well, Brown just double dogged because John Gruden. Just hate the face.
So, joining us today was Carlos on Instagram. Just followed us. We started chatting about fantasy, and I asked him to hit me with a final question for the podcast. I took it as soon as we went on. Tate or Shepard? Who's the number one in New York? Okay, hot take. Hashtag hot take. Who fucking cares?
Yeah, I mean,
I get late end of the draft, so we're going to entertain the question. But I don't like either of these guys. They have to be falling so much further for me. These guys are getting drafted in the 30 to 35 range. I don't think they're there.
For what, 3-yard receptions?
Well, listen.
I mean, how far can Eli throw it now?
What, PPR only for the NFC East when they're playing on the road?
Yeah.
You know, that's about it for me. But out of Tate or Shepard, I will go Shepard. I think Tate's only just another year older. Shepard is more of a slot receiver, which we know with a check-down quarterback, with either quarterback that's playing.
They're going to get looks.
You know they're checking it down. You know if Shepard can stay healthy, he might have a decent season. But I still think a decent season for him is top 40 on the upside. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. Look forward to next week when we break into our quarterback review for 2019. Part 1, Part 2. If you've listened to both, thank you so much. Check us out on Instagram, Trash Talk Fantasy _podcast. Check us out on Twitter at Fantasy _trash. We're out. Peace.
Later.
Deuces.